Hey guys, what's up? I'm gonna just preface the video with this. When I cut off the video last time, I actually cut off the lobby section of this raid. So this is actually just a straight continuation, although I'm recording this at a slightly different time. I did take a break between recording the last one and this one. But I'm gonna go in depth on what I think about the whole investment is wasted argument. I kind of went over a little bit in the last video. But I'm gonna use the purely hypothetical example because it'll make a little bit more sense. I know most people this case doesn't apply, but if you switch out Hydro Pump Kyogre with Golem and Origin Pulse Kyogre with Tyranitar with Smackdown, it works a little bit better. As a matter of fact, I'll just use both examples, because why not? So let's talk about this, right? So I'm going to use the example that probably applies to most people because I just realized hypothetical examples, the hypothetical example probably doesn't work for most people. So I'm going to try and find it and scroll down to it. So this is a Golem, right? I actually powered this one up. It was Rock Throw Stone Edge, and I used this in the Legendary Raid, the Legendary Bird Raids last year, right? Because it was the best we had. Now, objectively, Golem's a terrible rock type. Well, okay, it's not a bad rock type. Let me back up a little bit. It's not bad. It's not the best, and I think it barely qualifies as good. And Golem was only a god versus legendaries, the legendary birds, solely because, well, there wasn't anything that could really compete with it. Not even Tyranitar could, with his great stats, and that's because he lacked a rock type quick move, right? Then comes Larvitar Community Day, right? And all of a sudden, Tyranitar overshadows and completely renders Golem obsolete. And for people like me, who have 6 Smackdown Stone Edge Tyranitar, a lot of which are completely maxed out, their Golem armies are rendered completely obsolete. And like the only reason you see me using them in this video for Zapdos Day is because I often didn't have time to completely heal everything between raids, and it just wasn't convenient for me to, and I had the counters available. But let's assume that you're not me, and that you'll only be using the best rock types ever, right? Well, why did you spend the Stardust on the Golems then? The obvious answer is, like, when Legendary Birds were out, we didn't know anything like Community Day was going to happen. We didn't know Tyranitar was going to get a rock fast move. But in hindsight, all of a sudden, if you had just waited, then you would have had more Stardust to spend in the present day, right? Because you're going to spend Stardust on the Tyranitars anyway. So you lose out to people who didn't spend Stardust on their Golems. So by that argument, I'm technically ahead of people who went out and completely maxed out their Golems because I didn't. So I had more Stardust to spend on other things. And newer players who say maybe didn't play during Legendary Birds and then came back to the game, or who started after the Legendary Birds were available the first time, they basically missed out on that time when Golem was extremely prominent as a rock type and was considered the only real counter. And so they got to spend Stardust on other things that could counter flying types, like, say, Raikou, Jolteon. After Research Encounters came out, Zapdos, right? And then let's discuss the Zapdos example, right? So Charge Beam Zapdos are essentially fall in the same boat when compared to the Zapdos that were obtained this Saturday. So the one Zapdos that I have powered up loses with Charge Beam, loses out to all the Zapdos I got Saturday with Thundershock. And why? Because this Zapdos just wasn't caught at the right time. It was caught too early, so it wasn't able to achieve its fullest potential, at least at the moment, because of its move pool. And then the hypothetical example, so let's say you're like me, and you went ahead and you already saw there's one powered up Kyogre already I have that's at 3400, and it has Hydro Pump. Then I have this monstrosity that's completely maxed out, right? So that cost me 250,000 Stardust, just the one 4051 CP Kyogre. And the other one cost me like another 75,000, right? But, Origin Pulse, Kyogre's signature move, is already in the game data, right? It just needs to be implemented, and it's way better than Hydro Pump. And the assumption is, well, if they're going to release exclusive signature moves even for legendaries through legendary days like this, then why invest in really strong legendaries now? Just wait until they come out with their exclusive moves and then just power those up. And the only ones that don't quite, apply are, Pokemon whose best sets are off-type, or, they fill multiple roles. So, like, Mewtwo has 3 different roles he can fill. He can be a Psychic-type Specialist, he can be a Fighting-type Gym Sweeper, or, a Generalist in Raids with Shadow Ball. And, like, the one I have maxed out has Shadow Ball, right? And then I have 2 other Mewtwo I've powered up, one with Psychic and one with Focus Blast, right? And in Mewtwo's signature move, Psy Strike is already in the game, but really all Psy Strike would do is it would invalidate any Psychic Mewtwo, and that can be fixed with a Charge TM. So I would just Charge TM this to say Shadow Ball, or Focus Blast or something, and, he would all of a sudden, that problem solved. And for Groudon it would be, he has 2 viable sets, Solar Beam and Earthquake. Precipice Blades actually I think is like 24% better DPS than Earthquake, so any Earthquake Groudon really does lose out, but you can just change that to Solar Beam, right? And with Primal Groudon, who gets a Fire typing, you can give it Fire Blast too, and that's a completely viable set as well, once the Primal comes out. But for Kyogre, who doesn't get an extra typing, who just stays a Water type, being a Water type is probably the best thing to do, right? Having a Water set. And what happens is, because the exclusive moves, quote-unquote, are not TMable, this Kyogre will always come in second to any future Kyogre with Origin Pulse, no matter what. Like, in a vacuum, this one will just be inferior. And, does that mean that the 250,000 Stardust I spent on that Kyogre, like, is it wasted? Because then why spend it, right? Like, why should I spend it when I am scared that, something better will come out? And something similar has happened with Community Day, right? Community Day Pokemon. Like for Metagross, this has Bullet Punch Flash Cannon, right? That's a terrible steel set. And that doesn't, Metagross is held back from being, a great Pokemon, a supreme Pokemon by his move pool. He got terrible Psychic and Steel moves. And Earthquake isn't actually the best ground-type move in the game either. We just only talk about Earthquake because no good ground-type gets better ground moves. Dig and Bulldoze are actually better ground moves in Pokemon Go for DPS, but no good ground-type gets those moves. They only get Earthquake. And Draco Meteor is a terrible move. I'm going to just say this. I hate Draco Meteor. I refuse to use any Pokemon with Draco Meteor. And why? Because it's so slow. It loses out to Outrage and damage, and Salamence really has been done dirty by having Draco Meteor be his only stab charge move. And I have a 96% Bagon I refuse to evolve because, Salamence's Community Day may come around and he'll get Outrage or something. I don't know. If he gets a flying move, that'll still be better than having Draco Meteor, I promise you. But then, what is this fear of evolution, this fear of powering up, FOPO? We have FOMO, now we have FOPO. What do we do about it? And I've thought about this a lot. I've even said, I've done a couple of commentaries already, trying to get, for this video, just trying to get, what I'm trying to say right. And my first reaction was, well, I'm sorry that you spent all the Stardust excessively. I think that spending, enough on, say, one Kyogre, I don't think that's a lost investment, because I'm going to find use for that Kyogre before, say, Origin Pulse comes out, right? And I already have found use for it. So I think just in that respect, and I was thinking something, people who soloed Claydol with Hydro Pump Kyogre, that achievement couldn't have been done without Kyogre, right? So right then and there, you did something great, something that, only really some of the best players of the game could possibly do. And it wouldn't have been possible if you were too scared to power Pokemon up, right? And for Groudon, which artist was kind of a weird case because, Solar Beam and Earthquake are both viable sets, and Fire Blast is a viable set too. Sorry for the pause there. I just kind of lost my train of thought for a second. But, I already said that Groudon's kind of a mixed case, but for ground-type Groudons, right, Jolteon solos wouldn't happen without Groudons, right? And for most people, if you don't have Groudon, Jolteon isn't possible, right? Especially if you don't have the Weather Boost, Jolteon isn't possible, without Groudon. Excuse me. So those powered up Groudons, you really need those to do that, and that achievement couldn't be possible without it. So I won't sit here and say, you know, and I was really salty this 2367 ran away from me, I'm just saying. And before you say like, oh, well, you weren't really trying to catch it, I really was. There was water on my screen, and, you know, we were trying to make these raids. If you look up, it's 4:45. I was just kind of upset, because I was like, if this was an actual Zapdos raid, and it wasn't like, you know, an exclusive day, I could have taken my sweet time with you, but I wanted that weather-boosted shiny, my guy. I wanted it, and I wanted it slightly more than the 2367 CP weather-boosted Zapdos, just slightly more. Oh well. But I'm like, if you used it, continuing where I left off, if you used the Pokemon, then you're not losing an investment per se. Yeah, it becomes obsolete, but this is Pokemon, and Pokemon is a living franchise. I'm gonna catch this Nidoran. Pokemon is a living franchise. Like, it's not dead. 7 generations aren't all. We're getting an 8th generation within the next year, where we're gonna have probably 8 or 9 more generations at least of Pokemon. And so long as there's content like that, then Pokemon Go will always have new Pokemon to add. And, like, honestly, do you think Kyogre is going to be the best water type ever when all is said and done? When the world ends and Pokemon is over, do you think that Kyogre will be the best water type ever? I don't think so. Like, I don't think Pokemon from the first 7 generations are going to be the best Pokemon when all is said and done. So, I won't sit there, because if you talk about, you know, like, what's the content to come, maybe even investing in Origin Pulse Kyogre isn't a good idea. And, like, fear of powering up because, you know, something better may come along, that's not a good reason to not power things up. Why? Because there will always be something better. For the moment, Kyogre will be uncontested as a water type across all gens, especially if it gets Origin Pulse. But that's across all gens, and the number of generations is going to go up, so there probably will be something that'll unseat Kyogre at some point in the future. So, you can take that and then say, well, I'll never power up a Kyogre, but I'm saying, no, that means you should, because that's years down the line. Invest now so you can do cool things now, and when, you know, cooler stuff comes out, don't power up 6 Kyogres, you know? I know someone who's like, well, they can't do that, because that means my investment in my 6 maxed out Kyogres are worthless. And I'm like, well, not quite, because you have 6 maxed out Kyogres for one. So you are really strong. I wouldn't say that that's worthless, because Kyogre is actually a very good generalist as well as a water type specialist. So no, it's not wasted. And for another, well, you know, take this as a lesson. You could probably achieve as much with 2 Kyogres that are maxed out as you could with 6. So next time only max out 2 legendaries, right? Like, at most. For a couple who can fill variable roles, maybe more than 2. Like, I have 3 powered up Groudons, 1 maxed out. And 1 is double ground, and then 2 have Solar Beam. Groudon can have variable roles, though, so that's okay. And then Mewtwo has multiple roles. I plan on having 3 maxed out, 1 with each different charge move, for the specific roles I want Mewtwo to fill, right? So, like, take that into consideration. Like, you know, be modest with your investments. Don't do it in excess. Be smart, right? And this is the very last Zapdos raid. We were on the clock for this. Oof. We were running and stuff in the rain. So, but it was fun. I really enjoyed this. And that's the thing. Remember to have fun. Like, your investments aren't wasted if you have fun. And I'm not saying, you know, be less hardcore about the game. I'm just saying, you know, well, yeah, maybe I am. I'm not as hardcore as, you know, the most hardcore players. I'm like, maybe this upsets people because, you know, your investments to try and min-max as much as possible are wasted. But what I'm saying is, like, in a living franchise, that was never going to be possible. In a game that's alive, that's constantly growing and evolving, like Pokemon is, you're never going to always be ahead of the game if you do nothing. Like, if you powered up your Golems to max, you were never going to always have the best rock types. Sorry. And, like, even if Tyranitar didn't get smacked down, you know, that wasn't going to be the case, because Rampardos exists next gen, Rhyperior exists next gen in Sinnoh, and more good rock types come after Sinnoh. And, you know, for psychic types, Mewtwo is going to have competition, obvious competition in the next gens. In Gen 7, you get 3 really strong psychic types in, you know, the Solgaleo, Lunala, and Necrozma. This is the end, right, of the compilation, so we're going to wrap this up. But also, I don't like how Niantic is doing this. I really hope that their strategy for, you know, these legendary days and these exclusive legendary moves isn't going to just like this isn't going to be the only way. This isn't going to be how exclusive they're always going to be. And what I also hope is that, you know, there is a middle ground. I'm kind of okay with having, you know, exclusive move TMs. That'd be okay, I think. I'm not opposed to having it for both Community Day Pokemon and Legendary Pokemon, but because for the most part, you know, except for your first 5 raids, exclusive legendary moves are locked behind a paywall, I'm a little bit more okay with legendary Pokemon exclusive move TMs being a thing, and Community Day Pokemon move TMs maybe not. I don't know, because you can prepare in advance. You can have Pokemon to evolve in advance for Community Day, right? And there's not really a way to prepare for legendary Community Days. So I think at the very least, maybe an exclusive move TM for legendaries would be okay. But I'm also saying, like, you know, we as a player base maybe expect too much. Especially the hardcore players, who I really hear these complaints from, right? You don't really hear of, like, extremely casual players having 6 maxed out Kyogre, I suppose. So, you know, but that just stuck in my head, and I was like, well, maybe you shouldn't have done that. You know, the world isn't completely fair, and that's the same for life as well as Pokemon Go. So, you know, be a little bit more moderate, spend Stardust in moderation, but also don't think, like, you know, if you found use in it but it gets dethroned, it becomes obsolete, that, you know, your investments were all wasted, because that's like saying, I bought an iPhone 8 today. Well, I guess the iPhone 10 is the newest one, so I bought an iPhone 10 today, but you know, in like 2 years there'll be an iPhone 11, so why should I spend it now? That investment's wasted. Except it's not, because you're gonna get use out of that iPhone 10 for the next couple of years, right? Definitely. So don't sit there and make that argument, because that's not quite true. I'm not gonna say that's wrong, but it's not quite true. And the last thing I want to say, I'm way over time, but this is the last thing I want to say about this. If you got a lot of spare Pokemon from these legendary days, hold on to them, and trade them to people who weren't able to participate. Right? Got this Torkoal in a trade, by the way, the one at the top of this list. But like, I'm not going to use all these Zapdos. I'm not going to power them all up. But, you know, say like this 78% weather boosted Zapdos with Thundershock, right? I'll probably never use this, but someone may be able to. So maybe I'll just trade this to someone who needs it, right? And I've been very generous with trades. I'm like, you know, give me a Pidgey or something. So maybe we should hold on to spare Pokemon like this for, you know, when people really need them. Don't just transfer them. As a matter of fact, they're actually worth more candy to you if you trade them, because you have the potential of getting more than just the one candy that you would normally get from transferring, right? So do that too. Let's look out for each other, especially because the game isn't perfect. So let's cover for the shortfalls of it, you know, by being a community, right? Isn't that the whole point of this game? Well, like, a big point of it is, you know, like, having a good, thriving community. So let's do that too, you know? You know, so I think Niantic needs to do at least one thing, and I think we can do a couple of better things. We can change our perspective just a little bit, and we can look out for ourselves as well. And you know what, Niantic, also really look into doing that exclusive move TM too. I really like the idea. Anyway, that's all. As you can see, this has been Lord Zakari and my disappointing looking shiny Zapdos. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And I'll see you guys in the next one.